When the encrypted message flashed across Sergeant Marcus Reed's secure phone at 3:17 a.m. on a frost-covered January morning, he never imagined those 12 words would force him to choose between his sworn oath to the crown and protecting the two most precious lives in the British royal family. Credible threat identified: Princess Catherine and Prince George. Immediate action required. What followed was not just another security protocol or routine drill, but a desperate 72-hour battle against time, betrayal from within the palace walls, and enemies who had been planning this moment for years. In a world where royal protection had become a deadly game of chess, one guard would discover that sometimes the most dangerous threats come from those closest to the throne. This is the untold story of how courage, sacrifice, and split-second decisions in the shadow of Buckingham Palace would either save or doom the future of the British monarchy forever. The morning mist clung to the ancient stones of Windsor Castle like a gray shroud, and Sergeant Marcus Reed felt an unusual chill that had nothing to do with the January weather. As he completed his third security sweep of the East Wing, where Princess Catherine and 9-year-old Prince George were staying during the school holidays, something felt wrong. After 15 years protecting the royal family, Marcus had developed an instinct that rarely failed him. His radio crackled to life. Alpha 7, report to command immediately. The voice belonged to Colonel James Whitmore, head of royal protection, and the urgency in his tone made Marcus quicken his pace through the marble corridors, lined with portraits of kings and queens who had ruled for centuries. The command center was buzzing with activity when Marcus arrived. Multiple screens displayed security feeds from every corner of the castle grounds, while intelligence officers huddled over computers, their faces grim. Colonel Whitmore stood at the center of it all, his usually composed demeanor showing cracks of concern. "Marcus, we have a situation," Whitmore began without preamble. "Our sources have intercepted communications suggesting a coordinated attack on Princess Catherine and Prince George. The threat level has been elevated to critical." Marcus felt his blood run cold. In all his years of service, he had never heard those words spoken about the royal children. "What kind of attack, sir? When?" "Intelligence suggests within the next 48 hours. The details are fragmented, but it appears to be an inside job." Whitmore's eyes swept the room. "Someone with intimate knowledge of palace security protocols is feeding information to hostile actors." The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. If there was a mole within the royal protection team, then nowhere was safe. Not the castle, not the secure facilities, not even the trusted circle of guards who had devoted their lives to protecting the crown. "Sir, what are your orders?" Whitmore pulled Marcus aside, lowering his voice. "I'm implementing Protocol 7, complete lockdown of the East Wing. Princess Catherine and Prince George are not to leave their quarters under any circumstances. But Marcus, I need someone I can trust absolutely to oversee their personal protection." "You have my word, Colonel." "Good. But there's something else." Whitmore's expression darkened further. "The threat intelligence suggests the attack will come from someone wearing our uniform." Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders like a lead blanket. "How many people know about Protocol 7? "Just you, me, and Detective Inspector Sarah Walsh from the Specialist Protection Unit. Everyone else will be told it's a routine security exercise." Whitmore handed Marcus a sealed envelope. "Your detailed orders. Memorize them and destroy the document. And Marcus, trust no one else." No one. As Marcus made his way back to the East Wing, his mind raced through the possibilities. Who among his colleagues could be involved? He had worked alongside these men and women for years, shared meals with them, attended their weddings, celebrated their children's birthdays. The thought that one of them might be planning to harm Princess Catherine or Prince George was almost incomprehensible. The East Wing felt different now, charged with invisible danger. Marcus positioned himself outside the princess's private sitting room, where she was having breakfast with Prince George. Through the partially open door, he could hear their conversation, Catherine helping her son with a difficult passage from his history book about the Tudor dynasty. "Mummy, why did so many people want to hurt the kings and queens back then?" Prince George asked, his young voice filled with innocent curiosity. Princess Catherine's response was gentle but thoughtful. Power has always attracted both loyalty and jealousy, darling. That's why we have such wonderful people like Sergeant Reed to keep us safe. Marcus's throat tightened. The trust in her voice made his mission feel even more critical. These weren't just his charges. They were human beings who deserved to live without fear, to enjoy simple moments like a mother helping her child with homework. His earpiece buzzed with a message from Detective Inspector Walsh. Marcus, I'm reviewing the security footage from the past week. Can you meet me in Surveillance Room B in 10 minutes? Copy that, Marcus replied, but something about her tone bothered him. Walsh was usually calm and professional, but there was an edge to her voice he couldn't identify. Before leaving his post, Marcus arranged for Corporal James Fletcher, one of his most trusted team members, to take his place. Fletcher had been with the unit for 8 years and had an impeccable record. If anyone could be trusted, it was him. Surveillance Room B was located in the castle's basement, a high-tech facility filled with monitors and recording equipment. When Marcus arrived, Detective Inspector Walsh was alone, studying footage on one of the main screens. She was an attractive woman in her early 40s, with sharp green eyes and auburn hair pulled back in a professional bun. Her reputation for thoroughness and dedication was legendary within the protection services. Marcus, thank you for coming. I found something disturbing. She gestured to the screen which showed footage from the castle's main entrance 3 days earlier. Watch this carefully. The video played in slow motion, showing various staff members and officials entering the castle throughout the day. Walsh paused the footage on a figure in a maintenance uniform. This man entered the castle at 2:47 p.m. on Tuesday. According to our logs, no maintenance work was scheduled for that day. Marcus leaned closer to the screen. The man's face was partially obscured by a cap, but his build and movements suggested military training. Have you run facial recognition? That's the problem. The cameras mysteriously malfunctioned for exactly 17 minutes during his visit. Very convenient timing. Walsh pulled up another screen showing security badge access records. But here's what's really interesting. Someone used a legitimate maintenance access card during those 17 minutes, a card that was supposedly lost 6 months ago. Inside job, Marcus muttered, feeling pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. It gets worse. Walsh opened another file. I've been analyzing communication patterns among the staff. 3 days ago, there was an unusual spike in encrypted messaging between certain team members, messages that weren't logged in our official communication system. Marcus studied the data, his security training allowing him to quickly identify patterns. These communication spikes, do they correspond with shift changes around the East Wing? Exactly. Someone has been coordinating timing with remarkable precision. Walsh's expression grew grave. Marcus, I think the attack is planned for tonight. The words hit Marcus like a thunderbolt. Tonight. Less than 12 hours away. What's the plan? How do we stop it? That's where things get complicated. Walsh moved to a different computer terminal. Colonel Whitmore wants to move Princess Catherine and Prince George to a secure facility in Scotland, but I've analyzed the transportation routes, and every single one has vulnerabilities that an insider could exploit. Marcus felt frustrated. So we're trapped. We can't keep them here, and we can't safely move them. Not exactly. Walsh's eyes gleamed with determination. There is one option, but it's risky and completely off the books. I've identified a safe house that doesn't exist in any official records. A place that only I know about. Where? A cottage in the Welsh countryside. It belonged to my grandfather, a former intelligence officer. It's been modified with security features that would make it virtually invisible to any tracking systems. Walsh pulled out a hand-drawn map. The route I've planned avoids all main roads and official checkpoints. Marcus studied the map carefully. This could work, but we'd be completely on our own. No backup, no official support. That's exactly what we need. Complete isolation from anyone who might be feeding information to the enemy. Walsh's voice dropped to a whisper. But Marcus, there's something else. I think the mole is someone very close to the colonel. What makes you say that? The intelligence about Protocol 7. Only 3 people knew the exact details. and the timing of these intercepted communications suggests someone learned about it almost immediately after Whitmore briefed us. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. If the mole was that close to the center of command, then nowhere in the official security apparatus was safe. When do we move? Tonight. During the shift change at midnight. It's the only window where we can move them without raising immediate suspicion. Walsh handed him a small device. This is a secure communicator. It's not connected to any palace systems. We'll use this to coordinate. As Marcus prepared to return to his post, Walsh grabbed his arm. Marcus, once we do this, there's no going back. We'll be protecting them outside the system with no official authority and no guarantee that we won't be branded as traitors ourselves. Princess Catherine and Prince George's safety is worth any risk. Marcus replied without hesitation. Good, because I have a feeling that before this is over, we're going to discover that the threat goes much deeper than we imagined. Walking back through the castle corridors, Marcus felt the weight of history pressing down on him. These ancient walls had witnessed countless plots and conspiracies over the centuries, but somehow this felt different, more personal, more immediate. In just a few hours, he would be making decisions that could change the course of the British monarchy forever. When he returned to the East Wing, Corporal Fletcher was still at his post, alert and professional, as always. "Everything quiet, sir," Fletcher reported. "Princess Catherine is reading with Prince George in the library." Marcus nodded, but his mind was already racing ahead to the challenges of the night. How would they convince Princess Catherine to leave the castle? How could they ensure Prince George's safety during the journey? And most importantly, how could they stay ahead of enemies who seemed to know their every move? As the afternoon wore on, Marcus found himself studying every face, analyzing every gesture, searching for signs of deception among his colleagues. The paranoia was exhausting but necessary. Somewhere among these dedicated professionals was someone willing to betray the crown for money, ideology, or blackmail. The castle seemed to grow quieter as evening approached, but Marcus knew it was the deceptive calm before a storm. In just a few hours, he would be taking Princess Catherine and Prince George into the darkness, trusting their lives to a plan that existed only in the mind of Detective Inspector Walsh, and his own determination to protect them at any cost. The future of the monarchy might well depend on the decisions they made in the next few hours. At 11:30 p.m., Marcus stood outside Princess Catherine's private quarters, his heart pounding with the weight of what he was about to do. The corridor was dimly lit by ancient wall sconces, casting long shadows that seemed to dance with his growing anxiety. In 30 minutes, he would either save the lives of two of the most important people in Britain or potentially destroy his career and reputation forever. His secure communicator vibrated with a message from Detective Inspector Walsh. "Vehicle ready. Exit route confirmed clear. Time to go." Marcus took a deep breath and knocked softly on the princess's door. When she opened it, still dressed in an elegant but casual evening outfit, her expression immediately shifted from mild surprise to concern at seeing the serious look on his face. "Sergeant Reed? Is everything all right?" "It's quite late for a security check. Your Highness, I need to speak with you urgently about a security matter. May I come in?" Princess Catherine stepped aside, allowing him to enter the warmly decorated sitting room where Prince George sat on a sofa, already in his pajamas, playing a quiet game on his tablet. The scene of domestic tranquility made Marcus's mission feel even more surreal. "Mummy, is something wrong?" Prince George looked up from his game, his young face showing the intuitive concern that children possess when they sense adult tension. "Nothing for you to worry about, sweetheart," Catherine replied. But her eyes never left Marcus's face. "Sergeant, please tell me what's happening." Marcus had rehearsed this conversation in his mind dozens of times, but facing the reality was far more difficult than he had anticipated. "Your Highness, we have received credible intelligence about an imminent threat to your safety and Prince George's safety. I need to relocate both of you to a secure location immediately." "What kind of threat?" Princess Catherine's voice remained calm, but Marcus could see the protective instinct flaring in her eyes as she moved slightly closer to her son. "Ma'am, the details are classified, but I can tell you that we believe the threat comes from someone with inside knowledge of palace security. For your protection, we need to move you to a location that is completely off the official radar." Prince George set down his tablet, his young mind processing the adult conversation with surprising maturity. "Are we in danger, Sergeant Reed?" Marcus looked at the boy, remembering his own son who was about the same age. "Prince George, my job is to make sure you and your mother are always safe. Sometimes that means taking extra precautions." "Like an adventure?" the young prince asked, with the resilience that only children can display in uncertain situations. "Something like that," Marcus replied, grateful for the boy's attitude. Princess Catherine studied Marcus's face carefully. "Sergeant, in all the years you've protected our family, I've learned to trust your judgment. But this feels different. Are you asking us to leave palace protection entirely?" "Yes, ma'am. For the next 48 hours, until we can identify and neutralize the threat." The silence stretched for several moments as Princess Catherine weighed the implications. She was no stranger to security concerns, but leaving the protected environment of the palace was an extraordinary step. "Who else knows about this plan?" "Only Detective Inspector Walsh and myself, Your Highness. We believe the threat comes from within our own ranks, so we've kept the circle of knowledge as small as possible." Princess Catherine walked to the window, looking out at the castle grounds she knew so well. "If we do this, what guarantees do we have for George's safety?" "My life, Your Highness. I give you my personal guarantee that I will protect both of you with my life." The sincerity in Marcus's voice seemed to reach her. She turned back to face him, her decision made. "How long do we have to prepare?" 5 minutes, ma'am. We need to leave during the midnight shift change." "George, we're going on an unexpected trip," she said, moving to her son's side. "Pack only essential items in your school bag. Warm clothes and anything special you don't want to leave behind." Prince George responded with the adaptability of youth, quickly gathering items while asking practical questions. "How long will we be gone? Can I bring my history book? What about breakfast tomorrow?" "We'll figure all of that out as we go," his mother assured him, while she quickly gathered her own essentials. As they prepared to leave, Marcus's communicator buzzed with an urgent message from Walsh. "Problem. Colonel Whitmore is conducting an unscheduled inspection of the East Wing. Delayed departure until 12:15. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. An unscheduled inspection at this exact time was either an incredible coincidence or confirmation that their plans had been discovered. He quickly typed back. "Understood. Standing by." "Is there a problem, Sergeant?" Princess Catherine had noticed his tense expression. "A minor delay. We'll need to wait another 15 minutes. Those 15 minutes felt like hours. Marcus positioned himself by the door, listening for footsteps in the corridor, while Princess Catherine kept Prince George calm by reading quietly to him from his favorite book. The domestic scene was both beautiful and heartbreaking, knowing that their normal life was about to be disrupted for an unknown period. Finally, Marcus's communicator signaled the all-clear. "Move now." Side entrance. Black estate car. "Your Highness, it's time." They slipped out of the quarters like ghosts, moving through corridors that Marcus knew by heart. He had mapped out a route that avoided the main security checkpoints, using service passages and staff areas that were largely unmonitored during the shift change. Prince George held his mother's hand tightly, his young face serious but brave. "This is like the stories about kings and queens having to escape from their castles," he whispered. "That's exactly right," Princess Catherine whispered back. "And just like in those stories, we have brave protectors helping us." Detective Inspector Walsh was waiting by the side entrance with a nondescript black estate car. She was dressed in civilian clothes, looking more like a suburban mother than a highly trained protection officer. "Your Highness," she said quietly, "I know this is irregular, but I promise we have your best interests at heart. I trust Sergeant Reed's judgment," Princess Catherine replied as they quickly got into the vehicle. As they drove away from Windsor Castle, Marcus felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. They had successfully left the palace, but now they were truly on their own, with no backup and no official support. The weight of responsibility felt heavier with every mile they traveled. "Where are we going?" Prince George asked from the back seat where he sat between Marcus and his mother. "To a safe house in Wales," Walsh explained. "It's in a beautiful area where you'll be able to see mountains and perhaps even some sheep." The journey took them through small villages and winding country roads that Walsh navigated with expert precision. She had clearly planned this route meticulously, avoiding main thoroughfares and any areas where they might encounter police patrols or security cameras. As they drove through the night, Princess Catherine asked the question that had been weighing on everyone's mind. How serious is this threat? I need to know what we're really facing. Walsh glanced at Marcus before responding. Your Highness, based on our intelligence, we believe there is a coordinated plan to kidnap both you and Prince George. The goal appears to be political rather than financial. Political? We believe the intention is to force certain policy changes or perhaps create a constitutional crisis. By holding you hostage, they would have leverage over the government and the monarchy itself. Prince George, who had been listening quietly, asked with the directness of childhood, would they hurt us? Marcus felt his protective instincts flare. No, Prince George, we won't let anyone hurt you or your mother. The conversation was interrupted by Walsh's sharp intake of breath. We have a problem. Marcus looked ahead and saw blue flashing lights at a police checkpoint, about half a mile down the road. Is this routine? At 2 a.m. on a Wednesday night on this particular road. Highly unlikely. Walsh began looking for alternative routes on her GPS. They've found us faster than expected. How is that possible? Either we have a tracking device on the car or someone anticipated our route. Walsh's voice was tense as she made a quick U-turn. We need to change plans immediately. As they sped away from the checkpoint, Marcus's mind raced through the possibilities. Had their escape been discovered? Was the checkpoint legitimate police activity or something more sinister? Most importantly, how could they ensure the safety of Princess Catherine and Prince George if their safe house location had been compromised? Where can we go now? Princess Catherine asked, maintaining her composure despite the obviously escalating situation. I know a place, Marcus said suddenly. My family has a cottage in the Lake District. It's completely off any official records and far from where they would expect us to go. Walsh looked at him skeptically. That's a significant deviation from our plan. Our plan has been compromised. We need to adapt. I agree with Sergeant Reed, Princess Catherine said firmly. At this point, the further we get from official procedures, the safer we're likely to be. As they changed direction toward the Lake District, Marcus sent a quick text to his wife, taking the cottage for a few days. Emergency work situation. We'll explain later. He hated lying to her, but operational security demanded it. Prince George had fallen asleep against his mother's shoulder, exhausted by the night's events. Looking at the peaceful expression on the boy's face, Marcus renewed his determination to protect them both, no matter what it cost him personally or professionally. How much further? Princess Catherine asked quietly, not wanting to wake her son. About 3 hours, Marcus replied. We should reach the cottage just after sunrise. As dawn began to break over the English countryside, they finally approached the remote cottage that Marcus's family had owned for 2 generations. It sat on the shore of a small lake surrounded by hills and completely invisible from any main roads. More importantly, it was the one place in England that had no official connection to Marcus's professional life. It's beautiful, Princess Catherine said as they pulled up to the stone cottage. Prince George was just waking up, looking around with the wonder that children possess when they wake up somewhere new and unexpected. As they settled into the cottage, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that their troubles were far from over. The speed with which they had been tracked suggested that the conspiracy was larger and more sophisticated than they had initially believed. But for now, they were safe, hidden away in one of the most remote corners of England, with time to plan their next move. The real test would come when their absence was discovered at the castle, and the full resources of both legitimate security forces and hostile actors were deployed to find them. The morning sun reflected off the pristine waters of Lake Windermere as Marcus conducted his 3rd security sweep of the cottage perimeter. It had been 12 hours since they arrived at his family's retreat, and every hour that passed without discovery felt like a small victory. But he knew their window of safety was closing rapidly. Inside the cottage, Princess Catherine was helping Prince George with his morning routine, maintaining as much normalcy as possible under the extraordinary circumstances. The sight of them through the kitchen window, sharing breakfast and discussing the boys' school assignments, reminded Marcus of what he was fighting to protect. Detective Inspector Walsh emerged from the cottage's small office, where she had been monitoring intelligence channels on her secure laptop. Her expression was grim as she approached Marcus on the wooden deck overlooking the lake. "We have developments," she said quietly, handing him a tablet displaying encrypted communications. "The palace has officially reported Princess Catherine and Prince George as missing." But here's what's interesting. The official story being circulated is that they left for a private family matter. Marcus studied the information carefully. That's not standard protocol. If there was a genuine security concern, the response would be completely different. Exactly. Someone is managing the narrative, trying to keep public attention to a minimum while they search for them privately. Walsh pointed to another section of the intelligence report. But this is what really concerns me. 3 separate private security firms have been activated in the past 6 hours, all with contracts linked to offshore companies. Mercenaries. Highly trained, well-equipped mercenaries with significant resources and no accountability to British law enforcement. Walsh's voice carried a note of urgency. "Marcus, we're not just dealing with a palace mole anymore. This is a full-scale operation with international backing." The implications hit Marcus like a cold wave. How long before they track us here? With the resources they're deploying, maybe 24 hours, possibly less if they get lucky. Marcus felt the walls closing in around them. The cottage that had seemed like a perfect hiding place now felt like a trap. "We need to move them again. Where?" Every safe house I can think of is either officially logged or could be traced through financial records or personal connections. Walsh leaned against the deck railing, her strategic mind working through options. "We need to think completely outside conventional parameters." Their conversation was interrupted by Princess Catherine stepping onto the deck, carrying 2 cups of tea. "I hope I'm not interrupting something classified," she said with a slight smile, "but I thought you might appreciate some refreshment." Marcus accepted the tea gratefully, noting how the princess maintained her composure despite the stress she must be feeling. "Your Highness, we need to discuss our situation. I gather it's become more complicated." Significantly, Marcus chose his words carefully. "The resources being deployed to find you suggest this is larger than a simple kidnapping plot. We believe you may be facing a coordinated attempt to destabilize the monarchy itself." Princess Catherine absorbed this information with the composure that years of royal training had instilled in her. "What does that mean for George and me in practical terms?" "It means the people looking for you have resources that rival those of government agencies. They're not bound by legal constraints or jurisdictional limitations." Walsh's honesty was stark but necessary. "Your Highness, we may need to consider options that go beyond traditional protection protocols, such as..." Marcus had been thinking about this possibility since dawn. "Complete identity concealment, new appearances, false documentation, movement patterns that assume everyone is hostile until proven otherwise." "You're talking about going underground?" "Yes, ma'am. Temporarily disappearing so completely that even legitimate authorities can't find you until we can identify and neutralize the threat at its source." Princess Catherine was quiet for several moments, looking out across the peaceful lake. "How long might such an arrangement last?" "Days, weeks, possibly longer," Walsh admitted. "It depends on how quickly we can unravel the conspiracy." "And George? How do we explain this to a 9-year-old boy? How do we maintain his sense of security and normalcy?" Marcus felt the human cost of their situation most acutely when thinking about Prince George. "Children are often more adaptable than adults, Your Highness. And he trusts us. That might be enough." "Let me talk to him," Princess Catherine said finally. "He deserves to understand what's happening in terms he can process." While Princess Catherine had a private conversation with her son, Marcus and Walsh began planning their next move. The challenge was daunting. How do you hide 2 of the most recognizable people in Britain while maintaining their safety and working to resolve a conspiracy that had tentacles reaching into the highest levels of the establishment? "I have an idea," Walsh said suddenly. "It's unconventional, but it might work. I'm listening. My cousin runs a small touring theater company. They travel throughout northern England and Scotland, performing in small towns and villages, constantly moving cash-based transactions Minimal digital footprint. Marcus could see the potential immediately. Mobile, anonymous, and completely outside anyone's search parameters. The company is currently doing a winter tour of rural Scotland. Small venues, local audiences, no media attention. Walsh was warming to the idea. They could join the company as part of the technical crew. Hair dye, different clothing, basic disguises. It could work, Marcus agreed, but we'd need to trust your cousin completely. She's ex-military intelligence. If anyone understands operational security, it's her. Their planning was interrupted by Prince George running onto the deck, his face bright with excitement. "Sergeant Reed, Mummy says we're going to pretend to be different people, like actors in a play." Princess Catherine followed him out, and Marcus could see that she had managed to frame their situation as an adventure rather than a crisis. "I've explained to George that we're going to be like characters in a story for a little while." "What's my character?" Prince George asked eagerly. "That depends," Marcus said, crouching down to the boy's level. "What kind of person would you like to pretend to be? Maybe a normal boy whose mummy works in a theater? I could help paint scenery and learn about how plays are made." The enthusiasm in Prince George's voice was heartening, but Marcus also saw the deeper wisdom in his suggestion. A mother and son working with a traveling theater company would be virtually invisible while providing constant movement and built-in cover for their presence. "That's an excellent character choice," Marcus said seriously. "But remember, when we're playing these characters, we have to stay in character all the time, even when we're tired or forget. Like method acting." Prince George grinned. "I read about that in a book about theater." While Prince George continued to chatter about their upcoming performance, Marcus's secure phone buzzed with an urgent message. The sender was identified only as Whitmore Secure, but when Marcus opened it, the message chilled him to the bone. "Reed, your location has been compromised. Extraction team en route. Trust no one. The conspiracy reaches higher than we thought. Follow Emergency Protocol Delta." Emergency Protocol Delta was a last resort procedure that Marcus had hoped never to use. It meant complete communication blackout and movement to a predetermined extraction point where Colonel Whitmore would personally take charge of the operation. But something about the message bothered Marcus. The phrasing was slightly off, and Whitmore never used shortened versions of names in official communications. Marcus showed the message to Walsh, who immediately recognized the problem. "This isn't from Whitmore," she said quietly. "Someone is trying to flush us out. How can you be certain?" "Because I spoke to Whitmore 30 minutes ago. He's in London, in meetings, and has no knowledge of our location." The realization hit Marcus like a physical blow. Someone was actively hunting them, using sophisticated methods to try to trick them into revealing their position or moving to a predetermined location where they could be captured. "We leave now," Marcus said firmly. "Pack everything in 5 minutes." As they quickly gathered their minimal belongings, Marcus's mind raced through the implications of what had just happened. The fake message meant their pursuers were close enough to have intercepted communications or had access to intelligence systems that should have been secure. "Mummy, are we leaving already?" Prince George asked as they hurriedly loaded the car. "Our play is moving to a new theater," Princess Catherine explained smoothly. "The show must go on, as they say in the business." As they drove away from the cottage, Marcus couldn't help but feel they were leaving behind their last connection to the normal world. From this point forward, they would be completely on their own, with no institutional support and no safety net beyond their own skills and determination. Walsh navigated them towards Scotland, using back roads and small villages, avoiding any route that could be predicted or monitored. As they traveled, she made contact with her cousin, using a series of coded messages that had been established years earlier during their military service together. "Emma's company is currently in a village called Kirkenbright," Walsh reported. "She's agreed to take on 2 new crew members without asking questions." "How do we know we can trust her?" "Because she's the one who taught me never to trust anyone completely," Walsh replied with a grim smile. "But in this case, we don't have many alternatives." As the Scottish countryside rolled past their windows, Marcus reflected on how quickly their situation had evolved. Less than 48 hours ago, he had been a respected member of the Royal Protection Service with a clear mission and established protocols. Now he was essentially a fugitive, responsible for protecting two of the most important people in Britain while staying ahead of enemies who seemed to anticipate their every move. The most disturbing aspect was the growing evidence that the conspiracy extended far beyond anything they had initially imagined. The resources being deployed, the sophisticated intelligence gathering, the international connections, all of it pointed to something much larger than a simple kidnapping plot. As evening approached, they finally reached the small Scottish village where the touring theater company was performing. The venue was a converted church hall, and Marcus could see audience members filing in for the evening performance. For the first time in days, he allowed himself to hope that they might have found a truly safe haven. But as they parked behind the theater building, Walsh's phone buzzed with an urgent message that made her face go pale. "Marcus, we have a problem. Emma's not here." The message says she was called away on a family emergency yesterday. "Who's running the company?" "I don't know, and that's what scares me." Looking at the theater building, Marcus felt the familiar chill of approaching danger. Had they walked into a trap? Or was this simply another twist in an increasingly complex situation? Either way, they were about to find out just how far the conspiracy reached and whether their enemies had anticipated even this desperate gambit. The converted church hall buzzed with pre-performance energy as Marcus surveyed the situation from their parked car. Without Detective Inspector Walsh's cousin Emma to vouch for them, approaching the theater company became exponentially more dangerous. They were now completely on their own, with nowhere else to turn. "What do we do now?" Princess Catherine asked quietly, her composure finally showing small cracks after 3 days of constant stress. Marcus made a decision that would have been unthinkable 72 hours earlier. "We improvise. We approach the company and see if they'll take us on based purely on our story and our willingness to work." "That's a huge risk," Walsh warned. "We have no idea who these people are or whether they can be trusted." "Every option is a huge risk at this point," Marcus replied. "But sometimes hiding in plain sight is the safest strategy." Prince George, who had been unusually quiet during the drive, suddenly spoke up. "Maybe they're nice people who love theater." "Most people who love theater are good people, aren't they, Mummy?" His innocent observation reminded them all of what they were fighting to protect. This wasn't just about royal protocol or national security anymore. It was about preserving a child's ability to see goodness in the world. "You're absolutely right, sweetheart," Princess Catherine said, making her own decision. "Sometimes you have to trust people to be better than their circumstances." They approached the theater through the back entrance, where several company members were preparing props and costumes for the evening performance. Marcus had helped Princess Catherine and Prince George alter their appearances as much as possible during the drive, but he was acutely aware that anyone looking carefully might still recognize them. "Excuse me," Marcus said to a woman organizing costume pieces. "We're looking for work with your company. We heard you might need technical assistance." The woman, probably in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and paint-stained hands, looked them over appraisingly. "I'm Margaret Sinclair, company manager. What kind of experience do you have?" "General theater work." Walsh stepped forward smoothly. "My friend here has security experience that translates well to stage management, and Sarah here," she gestured to Princess Catherine, "has experience with costume design and child supervision." "And the lad?" "George loves theater and he's very responsible for his age," Princess Catherine said, unconsciously slipping into a slight northern accent that made her voice less recognizable. Margaret studied them for a moment longer, then smiled. "Well, we did have some folks leave unexpectedly yesterday, and we can always use reliable help. The pay isn't much, but we provide meals and accommodation. When can you start?"
"Immediately,"
Marcus said, hardly believing their luck. "Right then. Margaret's the name, and welcome to the Borderlands Touring Company. We're just about to start tonight's performance of the Scottish play, so you can watch from the wings and get a feel for how we operate." As they settled into the backstage area, Marcus began to believe that their desperate gambit might actually work. The theater company was exactly what they needed: a legitimate reason to constantly move, a tight-knit community that protected its own, and an environment where everyone was used to playing roles and maintaining fictional identities. Prince George was immediately fascinated by the technical aspects of theater production, asking intelligent questions about lighting and sound equipment while carefully staying out of the way. Marcus could see him blossoming in this environment, finally able to be curious and excited about something instead of worrying about danger. "Sarah, would you mind helping with quick costume changes?" Margaret asked Princess Catherine during the intermission. "We're short-handed tonight." "Of course," Princess Catherine replied, and Marcus watched in amazement as she seamlessly integrated herself into the backstage workflow. Her years of public appearances had given her an intuitive understanding of timing, coordination, and working under pressure. As the performance continued, Walsh discreetly positioned herself where she could monitor both the audience and the backstage area for any signs of threat. Marcus found himself genuinely impressed by the company's professionalism and the quality of their performance, despite the modest venue and limited resources. After the show, as the company gathered for their traditional post-performance meal, Margaret made an announcement. "We've got some new folks joining us: Mark, Sarah, Jane, and young George. They'll be traveling with us as we head north to the Highlands." The company members welcomed them warmly, but Marcus noticed one man who seemed to be studying them more carefully than the others. He was in his 30s, well-built, with a kind of alert posture that suggested military or security training. "I'm David Cameron," the man said, approaching Marcus after dinner. "Not the former Prime Minister," he added with a slight smile. "I handle security for the company when we're traveling in remote areas." Marcus felt his protective instincts sharpen. Security? Just common sense precautions. We're often traveling with cash receipts, expensive equipment, and we frequently stay in isolated locations. David's explanation was reasonable, but something in his manner set Marcus on edge. "What kind of background do you have for that work?" "Former Royal Marines." "I know how to spot trouble and deal with it if necessary." David's eyes seemed to linger on Princess Catherine and Prince George. "Nice family." "The boy seems bright." "Yes, he is. You seem pretty alert yourself." "Security background?" Marcus chose his words carefully. "Some army experience. You develop habits." "Indeed you do." David smiled again, but Marcus could see calculation behind his eyes. "Well, I'm sure we'll work well together." That night, as the company settled into their accommodation at a small inn, Marcus found it impossible to sleep. David's presence could be completely innocent, but the timing felt suspicious. How often did traveling theater companies employ security specialists? And why had he seemed so interested in Princess Catherine and Prince George? Walsh shared his concerns when they spoke quietly in the inn's lobby at 2 a.m. His questions were too specific, too focused. Either he's naturally suspicious, or he's looking for something particular. "We need to be ready to move quickly if necessary." "Agreed. I've identified 3 exit routes from this building and mapped the local area. If things go wrong, we can be gone in under 5 minutes. Their conversation was interrupted by footsteps on the stairs. David appeared in the lobby, fully dressed despite the early hour. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked casually. "I thought I'd check the perimeter before turning in." "Just restless," Marcus replied. "New places take some getting used to."
"Of course. Well, good night then." As David left the building, Marcus and Walsh exchanged worried glances.
Checking the perimeter at 2 a.m. was either extremely professional or highly suspicious behavior. "We need to make contact with legitimate authorities," Walsh whispered. "But carefully. Who can we trust at this point?" "There's someone, a former colleague who works with the Scottish police now. If I can reach him through secure channels, he might be able to verify David's background without triggering any alerts." The next morning brought new complications. Margaret announced that their next performance venue had changed due to a scheduling conflict, and they would instead be traveling to a remote Highland location that wasn't on their original itinerary. "It's a lovely venue," Margaret explained to the company. "An old castle that's been converted into a cultural center. Very atmospheric for our Scottish pieces." Marcus felt alarm bells ringing in his mind. Last-minute venue changes, remote locations, and the presence of someone whose background story didn't quite add up. All of it suggested that they might be walking into a carefully orchestrated trap. During the day's travel, Walsh managed to make contact with her Scottish police colleague using a payphone in a small village. When she returned to their vehicle, her face was pale. "David Cameron is who he claims to be," she reported quietly. "Former Royal Marines, legitimate security work. But here's the problem. He was contacted 3 days ago by someone claiming to represent the theater company, asking him to provide security for a special situation involving high-value clients. The pieces clicked into place for Marcus with terrifying clarity. They've been tracking us all along. This whole theater company situation was set up to draw us in. It gets worse. The castle we're heading to? It's owned by a subsidiary of one of the offshore companies that deployed the mercenary teams. Marcus felt the walls closing in around them for the final time. After days of running, improvising, and staying ahead of their pursuers, they had finally been outmaneuvered. The question now was whether they could extract Princess Catherine and Prince George before the trap was fully sprung. How long before we reach the castle? 2 hours, maybe less. Then we move now, before we get there. But as Marcus began planning their escape, he realized that their options had been systematically eliminated. They were traveling in a convoy with the theater company in remote highland countryside where any deviation from the route would be immediately obvious. David was in the vehicle behind them, and Marcus had no doubt that other security personnel were positioned throughout the convoy. "Mummy," Prince George whispered, having picked up on the adult tension. "Is our play almost over?" Princess Catherine took her son's hand, her voice steady despite their circumstances. "I don't know, sweetheart. But whatever happens, remember that you've been very brave." Marcus made a decision that surprised even himself. Instead of trying to escape, he would force the confrontation on his own terms. If their enemies wanted Princess Catherine and Prince George, they would have to go through him directly. As the castle came into view, perched dramatically on a highland cliff, Marcus began preparing for what might be his final act as their protector. The next few hours would determine whether his desperate gamble to shield them from danger had been a courageous success or a tragic failure. But whatever the outcome, he had given everything he had to protect two people who represented not just the British monarchy, but the hope that goodness and innocence could survive in a world full of complex dangers. The final confrontation was about to begin, and Marcus Reed was ready to stake everything on one last desperate play to save the future of the crown. 22-6 Palace Lockdown. Why the Guard risked everything to shield Catherine and George.